Did you know that you can watch many of your favorite GLC programs all in one place for free? Just go online at www.glc.us.com and click on the GLC Teachers tab at the top of the homepage. From there you can scroll through dozens of quality GLC video archives containing over 100 full-length programs, updated weekly and covering topics from Bible teachings and current events to scriptural, financial, and personal health. We've got it all covered at www.glc.us.com. So don't delay, start watching for free today.
GLC presents a Studio B production, brought to you by the donations of our faithful partners.
Well, shalom again. Welcome to On Wings of Truth. I'm excited about being here at the Ministry of Primetime TV and having an opportunity to present to you a series of teachings using the Hebraic perspective. If you are just tuning in to the program for the very first time, we started a program a week ago on the subject overcoming worry. I would advise you maybe to go back and try to obtain the copies of the tapes of the program or DVDs of the program, because the first program laid a foundation, and then this program is going to lay another foundation, and until we have completely went through and put together a presentation of the subject for overcoming worry. One of the things that I did, I'm not going to go back and go over the whole entire of the program, but I'm going to just read to you a brief statement that I read out of the book that we wrote some years ago, 1992, on the subject of worry, and then we'll proceed from there. Today, there is a subtle, unseen force sweeping across this country and the world, enslaving countless numbers of people from all walks of life. This force is so subtle that I have met individuals who believe they were born with it as a part of their behavior pattern. Still others are lured into its power without knowing this force is about to take control of their lives. It is clear that once this force has gained acceptance into the victim's heart, the force has now become master of that life. The force that I am speaking of is called worry. Now, we've been talking about overcoming worry and establishing how worry gains access into the hearts of an individual. And in the last program, we went back to the book of Genesis. It's really interesting because I teach courses in Old Testament history where we talk about, go back and look at the Old Testament from Genesis all the way through the book of Malachi. And one of the things that in going back in these classes and looking at these texts, I don't only read the English text, I go back and read the original Hebrew text so that I can extract deeper meaning and understandings of what the text is being able to communicate to me, as well as utilizing Jewish commentaries. You know, when I was doing my undergraduate studies, it was interesting because much of what I was learning based upon the religious aspect, Christian aspects of my studies, I only studied Christian authors. I read Christian commentaries about the New Testament, and then we have Christian commentaries who write about the Old Testament. And it wasn't until I got into my graduate study, working on my PhD, that I began to come in contact with a lot of Jewish sources that they wrote about their own history, that they can give detailed information explaining how they understood the scriptures as opposed to how we sometimes think we understand the scriptures. And our positions are not necessarily correct, because a lot of times our perspective is based upon Hellenistic perspective, how the church went through this Hellenistic period. We're not going to go over into all of that and talk about it, but a lot of that mentality colors how we view the biblical text. And so when we look at these passages, even in the Old Testament, there is this Hellenistic perspective that is shading how we view it. And so I went back from this perspective and went in and looked at these commentaries. There's one such commentary that I looked at was the book of Kamash, the Kamash commentary. There's a number of different scholars who write these 5 books of the Kamash, but it is a Jewish commentary of the 5 books of Moses. And in that, you can go back and read in reference to Genesis chapter 1, and then go down and read Genesis chapter 4, and you can read and get a commentary on every one of these verses. And to my delight, it opened up an understanding of what this text was beginning to communicate to me that I had not seen before. And let's go back to the text again. Genesis chapter 4, verse 6, it says, "Then the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin crouches at your door. Its desire to have you, but you must master it." Now, we were breaking down this concept of this particular verse as we were looking at it. Last program, the very first one, we talked a little bit about a downcast face. And a downcast face is a result of not doing what you should have done right. And Cain listened to the voice of worry speaking to his mind, telling him to follow something that was counter to what God's will was. And when he listened to that voice, he ended up doing what was wrong. And because of that, he had a downcast face, and he ultimately began falling out of the will of God. So let's look at a couple other points here that I think is important for us to understand. The text says, "But if you do what is right, sin crouches at your door." Now, the word sin here in the text, it says it crouches at your door. As I left in the last program, I made the statement that sin is the result of an action taken. I think you would agree with me on that point. It's the result of an action taken. In other words, sin happens when I do something. I choose incorrectly, producing sin. Now, what I want to ask you this time is, the text says sin is crouching at your door. I want to know, what is it talking about? What door could it be crouching at that is so important for me to know about in reference to sin? Is it the door to your house, to your living room, to the door that gives you entrance, the front door, the back door? What door? Is it a door even at all? And you see, what we don't do is we don't take enough time to understand these texts as they pertain to the individual's life. We read them as some historical narrative that is talking about something that happened long ago, without understanding that we're talking about real people who dealt with circumstances of life just as you are dealing with circumstances of life. And the result of how they walked and lived produced certain elements that also can be seen in the way you walk and live your life today as well. For instance, sin crouches at your door. Let's say that this is the beginning of the day for you. You're just waking up. You're still laying down in bed. And you've not made one decision or one choice. You've not had to choose between any action in that day. How can sin be crouching at your door when you've not chosen to sin as you're going into this particular day? Well, you see how complex this subject can be in trying to understand it. And in order to do so, we have to begin to break down a number of elements, because it's not necessarily speaking directly, it is speaking indirectly. And when we understand what is being spoken of indirectly, can we understand the intent of the text? The door that it is talking to about, according to the Kamash commentary, Jewish commentary, is the door to your life, the door to your very being. See, every day you arise and you begin to go forth into this day, or the day that you're moving forward in. And as you're moving forth in the day, you're going to be confronted with the opportunity to make a series of choices. And it's no getting around choosing, because during the course of the day, you've got to make choices and decisions. And you're going to be accepted based upon whether the choices you make are good, wholesome, and of God, or whether those choices are not. If you choose wrongly, sin is there, and sin is going to master you. If you choose correctly, then you learn how to master sin. So we're talking about worry. So what is this term sin anyway that we're talking about? Worry is sin. Well, let's break it down in a different way, because I said life is crouching at your door. Life does what? It brings before us each day a series of opportunities to choose. And most of the time we call those opportunities that begins to come before us that are so important that we have to make a decision on, we call them problems. Problems. Can we say problems crouch at your door? Certainly we can. We can say life crouches at your door, as well as worry is crouching at your door. All of these mechanisms are encapsulated into this phrase, sin crouches at your door. Problems are crouching at your door each day as you go forth, causing you to choose in how you're going to deal with that circumstance. Now, it's very interesting because, you know, as humans in this society here in our country, in America, we start our children out at a very early age, as well as we did ourselves, going to the elementary schools and going to middle schools and high schools and going to college. And, you know, the key element of that was learning how to solve problems. And then we have individuals who graduate from high school, and they may not go on to college, and they graduate from college, and you just brushing or come to them and meet them in a common day experience, and you make statements to one another like, how are you doing? And a person might say to me, as it has been said many times and continues to be said to me, oh, I would be doing all right if I could just get rid of these problems. And you know, for a long time, I never really thought about what we were saying until I started studying the Word and started realizing how important God's words or our words are that we speak. Our words are life. I would be all right if I can get rid of these problems. Well, you see, the fact of the matter is that problems never go away. Problems are going to always be something that you're going to have to deal with throughout the remaining of your life. And it's so interesting that problems actually become the vehicle by which God transforms your life. Because you see, when you begin to learn who you are in Christ Jesus, you can actually begin to go to the Lord and solicit his help by way of his Holy Spirit, who empowers you to deal with life circumstances and life problems. See, when you in and of yourself cannot solve the problem, the Spirit can empower you to solve the problem by telling you what you need to do and how you need to choose the right thing. And so problems are crouching at your door. Problems' desire is to master you, but you must learn to master them. Now, I didn't bring along with me in this show, and it was a little bit later after I had gotten here at the studio that I realized that I could have used a Hebrew lexicon for this particular lesson that we're looking at. I do have my my Hebrew text with me in looking at this verse in the Hebrew text in chapter 4 of Genesis. Bereshit is what it's called in Genesis. But it's interestingly enough, in the text in Hebrew, chapter 4, verse 6, it has the word elecha. Elecha. It uses the word elecha in reference to the word that we translate as its desire. You know, it's in verse 7, where it says, its desire. Ve'elecha tashukatem, or tushukato ve'ata tishal bo. You, its desire to have you, the word elecha, to have you. Now, I took my BDB, or Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew lexicon. No, not a Christian dictionary, a Hebrew lexicon giving definition of Hebrew words, not the English word, but Hebrew words. And I wanted to know what this word elecha really was. And when I looked it up in Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew lexicon, it said that it meant a force that comes toward you, whether mentally or physically. It means to have you, something that is to have you, whether mentally or physically. Now, when we say mentally or physically, mentally we say we're referring to invisible realm. Physically, we're referring to something that's coming toward us in a realm that we can see. And so this word is saying that sin or life problems or worry is coming at us in an unseen realm, and its desire is to have us, to have you. But the text begins to end by saying, you must master it. Now, when we look at this term, elecha, its desire is to have you. One of the things that I began to learn many years ago, because quite frankly, I was a worrier. I had gotten married. My wife and I had been married for now many years, and we were raising our children. They had gotten to an age where my son was engaged in various activities, sports and various things, and he would go out for the evening, and then he would tell us he would be home at a certain hour. You can identify with me with that, I'm sure, those of you who have children. And they didn't come in at the hour that they said that they were going to be there. And all of a sudden, something began to churn inside of me as to where my son was. Voices began to go off in my mind, telling me all type of ridiculous things about he's having problems, he's been laying in the side of the road, he's been shot, I don't know where he's at because he hadn't called. And so this element of worry begins to come and begins to speak to us. Now let me share with you a beautiful picture of worry. I knew I was going to do it at some point. Jewish literature teaches about the ugly one and how the ugly one gains access into the hearts of its victim. And so I'm not going to read it off or tell it to you the way to Jewish, but give you sort of my summary of what it says. It says a person is walking down the street of life, and as they are going down their day in life, they're dealing with some type of situation in their life or problem. And as they're going down the road of life, walking, the ugly one comes up behind the person, the individual, he or she, and begins to whisper into he or into that individual's ear, telling them how to deal with that circumstance. And because, you see, we're becoming so attuned to not making choices and decisions of our own self, we listen to the voice spoken in our minds, and we take the voice and we begin to act upon it. The next day comes around, and the same situation occurs. The person going down the walk of life, problems he has to deal with, she has to deal with. The ugly one still behind them, whispering in their ear, giving them answers of how to deal with the life circumstances. The next day comes along, the person walking down the street, dealing with life circumstances. And this day, as they're dealing with the life circumstances and problems before them, the ugly one is no longer behind that person. The ugly one is standing right on the side of the person, maybe even with his arms around his or her neck or shoulder, whispering into their ears, telling them how to deal with life circumstances. The next day comes along, and that process of walking side by side is repeated day after day after day, and it just keeps whispering into the ear. And then one day, the individual is walking down the street again, dealing with life circumstances, and now the ugly one is no longer behind the person, no longer standing on the side of the person. The ugly one is now in front. And when the ugly one is now in front of the person, he is leading that individual, guiding them and telling them how to respond. And you see, I woke up one day, didn't understand what had happened to me. How did I become such a worrier? To such a degree that the anxiety was just tearing me apart. And I knew something was wrong because I didn't grow up in a household where I saw my parents dealing with life circumstances based upon worry. Somehow or another, as I had gotten married, between my wife and myself, we had learned how to listen to the voice of the ugly one. And as we listened to him giving us words of thoughts of how to deal with life circumstance, he had gained access into our life. And you know what? I started saying to myself, I'm not going to worry anymore. You hear what I said? I'm not going to worry anymore. You know what I'm saying, because when you say that, you know you don't have control of your own will. That's what the scripture is saying here when we talk about this word elecha, to have you. Sin, to have you. Its desire is to have you. It is feeding you principles and concepts, trying to get you to begin to take the seed of what it wants you to know. And it is totally opposite of that of God's will. Instead of us listening to the voice of God, teaching us and showing us what we need to be doing and how we should be walking, we're listening to the voice of the ugly one, or we can say the spirit of Hasatan, speaking to our minds in the form of worry, in the form of anxiety, in the form of depression. And we're taking those thoughts instead of listening to the voices of God. We've got to find a way to get free from those voices. I know I did. And you see, when I realized that I'm now somebody to whom I had not been in the past. I remember being free and not having these voices controlling my mind and controlling the way I thought and controlling. It didn't matter what choice I may have wanted to do. If worry told me to go bang my head up against a wall, I had no control but to get up and do exactly what it wanted me to do. And it was embarrassing me. And I know you can identify with this. Because once worry begins to gain access and control in your life, it causes you to act out of the will of God. And all that you do and all that you say, you cannot get set free from that. See, we're going to talk about a principle that is important right here. Because you see, it is at this moment that you become aware of your inadequacies. You become aware of your own weaknesses. You become aware of your lack of ability, that you can become strong in knowing the power of God. You see, it is at this point, I like to tell people that they talk about, is God real? I tell them, not only is he real, I have empirical evidence that he is real. When we come back to the next program, we're going to go into, and I'll share a little bit of that empirical evidence that God is real. Because you see, when I know that I'm being controlled by a spiritual force, and I have did everything I can to get set free from that spiritual force, and I couldn't do it. And one day I woke up, and lo and behold, it's no longer there. It was God who came and removed it from us. You know what I'm saying, don't you? Because you see, there have been spiritual strongholds that have been a part of your life that were just like the spiritual force of worry. You couldn't get set free from it, no matter what it was that you did. And it wasn't until God came in to remove it from your life. And you see, I'm sharing it with you right now. This is what I call empirical evidence, because you see, when that force was no longer there in your life anymore, you know 100% that you didn't do it. And the only reason it is not there is because God has come and delivered you from that. All I did in my own walk when I was trying to get set free from worry, I just simply called out and said, God, if you don't do something, I'm going to die. I can't have this force controlling me no longer. And I realized that I couldn't get rid of it. And so I cried out in total destitution, Lord, save me from this. Take this out of my life. And you know what? The Lord did. And I know he's going to do and is doing the same thing in your life. As we continue in this program, we're going to begin to share more information on how to walk free from worry, how to overcome its powers and its influences of what it does when it begins to gain access into your heart, and just begin to share some simple principles, because we're going to go in and begin to look at some point at Jesus and what Jesus does or how he deals with this element of worry. I think in our next program we're going to go back and look at a little worry historically. I want to show you a little bit of how worry has appeared in some of the historical setting in the text. Now, thank you again for taking the time out to be with us on this program on Wings of Truth. We believe that you're learning a lot from this program, and I'm pleased that you're here with us. I look forward to seeing you again next week. Shalom.
If you enjoyed this clip, please feel free to check out the full version in the link located in the description panel below. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel. You can also connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. As always, help yourself to the diverse array of teachings located on this YouTube channel or on our website at glc.us.com.